I dropped out in the 4th grade to run drugs to support my nana.
That means you haven't known the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of high school football, but you will.
Cinderella 2015. I have been wanting to talk about this movie since the origin of my channel, but I never knew exactly how I wanted to do it. Disney's 2015 live-action version of Cinderella is the best live-action movie Disney has produced. That's just my personal opinion, and it will remain my personal opinion until Disney can top it. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. Not only is it my favorite Disney live-action remake, but it's also my favorite remake or retelling of any Cinderella. Very big claim, I know, but I do love it that much. What hurts the most about this movie is the amount of people that haven't seen it or know of its existence. Although the story of Cinderella is arguably one of the most famous stories in the world, and it was produced by Walt Disney Studios, the movie underperformed in comparison to other live-action remakes that came out both before and after it. At the point of its release, Alice in Wonderland, Oz, The Great and Powerful, and Maleficent had already been released, with Disney seeing massive success. This isn't to say that 2015 wasn't successful. It grossed over $201 million, so it definitely was. But I think I'm just surprised that it's never in the conversation when people are discussing Disney live-action adaptations. Perhaps it's Cinderella fatigue. We've been bombarded with the plethora of Cinderella retellings and reimaginings that by the time this movie was announced, I understand why people may not have felt the need to see it. Well, today I am here to tell you that you do in fact need to see it. In this video, I will be discussing what makes this movie so magical while also addressing its critiques. A general critique of Cinderella and the fairy tale of Cinderella is that compared to other major Disney princesses, she's often seen as weaker or just plainer. Because she doesn't have powers like Elsa or isn't a badass with a weapon like Mulan, Cinderella wouldn't be many people's definition of the quote-unquote coolest princess. Before continuing, it's important to address the elephant in the room. Like many early Disney fairy tales, the story of Cinderella is not the most feminist story, and I think that many people can agree with that. We all know the premise. Girl's mom dies when she's a kid, so it's just her and her dad. Her and her dad are really close. Dad remarries a woman who Cinderella isn't fond of. The woman has 2 daughters or evil stepsisters who are around Cinderella's age. Dad passes away on a work trip. Cinderella's left to live with her wicked stepmother and the stepsisters, who essentially treat her as a servant for years. If Cinderella had been created today by Disney, I fully believe it would have been about her finding out she has some magical power and finding a letter that her mom wrote before she died that thrusts her into this whole magical journey of self-discovery. However, it wasn't made today. In the original, Cinderella stays and endures the pain. She eventually gets out by marrying a prince. In its simplest form, Cinderella follows the story of a girl facing emotional abuse and manipulation. And a massive critique of Cinderella is, why didn't she just leave her life if it sucked that bad? Why would you stay in a position where you're treated that way? Why did she have to wait on a guy to save her? Celebrities as big as Keira Knightley have publicly shared their thoughts.
Cinderella, and because, you know, she waits around for a rich guy to rescue her. Don't rescue yourself, obviously.
So I actually do have a theory about people's perception of this story. So I think that a big divide surrounding how receptive people are to Cinderella's actions can be watered down to whether you're from a collectivistic versus individualistic culture. Stick with me for a second because my psychology degree is jumping out, but I promise you it will make sense. So, in a collectivistic culture, people tend to prioritize the needs of the overall group or the family over one's individual's wants or desires. In this type of culture or society, how people are connected to their family is very important and plays a large role in their day-to-day lives. Examples of collectivist societies are China, India, Mexico, Africa, and more. On the flip side of that, those in individualistic cultures tend to prioritize autonomy and self-needs. And this isn't to say that people in individualistic societies aren't close to their families or care as much about their societal norms, but they're typically more motivated by their own preferences and viewpoints. Think of the US, Canada, and most of Western Europe. This is just me laying out the facts. I am not speaking on whether one is better than the other. Personally, coming from and being raised by parents from a collectivistic culture, the idea that Cinderella stays with and continues to put her family first, even when she's in such a terrible situation, is something that made sense. It's easy for me to understand why she couldn't just leave her family behind, even if they didn't treat her well. I 100% understand the knee-jerk reaction of why didn't she leave sooner, or why didn't she put herself first and save herself, but it's important to acknowledge that this mindset aligns strongly with those of individualistic cultures. Again, I'm not saying that Cinderella herself came from a collectivistic culture or society and that's why she stayed. We in fact do know that's not true because in both the 1950 and 2015 Cinderella, those stories are meant to take place in a vague area of Europe, which as we established earlier, is typically individualistic. What I am saying is that for viewers watching, depending on what type of culture they might have come from or lived in, it might impact how they reacted to Cinderella staying in that toxic position. Again, this is just a theory of mine. I'm actually really curious to know whether you come from a more collectivistic or individualistic culture and how that shaped your thoughts on the Cinderella situation. And that's really all I have to say on that. This video is not going to really explain or analyze the anti-feminism of the story, but I felt that it was important to address. I'll leave you with this. In 2021, we have seen the repercussions of a hyper-feminist movie.
This is gorgeous!
Yes, future queen, yeah!
In this film, Cinderella, or Ella, was played by the lovely Lily James, and Prince Charming, or Kit, was played by one of the many loves of my life, Richard Madden. I had heard of both of them prior to this movie, Richard having been huge in Game of Thrones, and Lily having been a pretty popular British actress. However, I had never seen their acting before watching this movie. Having seen this movie too many times to count, I can wholeheartedly say that their casting for these roles was perfect. Lily is so elegant yet strong in her role, she's absolutely stunning, and Richard is a walking prince. Their chemistry on screen was there.
Please.
No, I shouldn't.
You should.
I shouldn't.
You should.
Shouldn't.
You should.
I will.
And you can tell they became friends both on and off the screen. They literally still hang out to this day, and that honestly warms my heart more than it should. Cate Blanchett plays the wicked stepmother, or Lady Tremaine, and she is just so good. This woman is literally a shapeshifter because every time I see her in a movie, she looks completely different. She really dives into the role of whatever character she's playing, and this is absolutely no exception. Also, she bodied every single outfit that she put on this film. Truly 10 out of 10. This movie also had, so sorry if I butcher this, Helena Bonham Carter as the fairy godmother, and she is amazing in this as well. So something that I could never really understand growing up is how no one recognized Cinderella at the ball, whether it was in the 1950 version where she had nothing on her face, or any really retelling after where it was often a small portion of her face hidden because it was commonly a masquerade ball. It just didn't make sense to me that no one recognized her. Now, I never really held this against the story because it's a fairy tale which requires some suspension of disbelief, but I think that as the story of Cinderella is modernized, it doesn't make sense for that not to be addressed. In Disney's 2015 live action, the fairy godmother actually uses her magic to make sure Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters don't recognize Cinderella. And it was a very simple fix that was thrown in there, yet it was absolutely perfect. I also adore how, in comparison to the animated film, they have Kit and Ella actually meet and form a connection just as themselves before the ball. In this scene, Ella has no idea he's the prince and she puts him in his place, and it's magnificent, really.
But you've nearly frightened the life out of him.
Who?
The stag. What's he ever done to you that you should chase him about?
With the scene added, Ella now has a purpose for wanting to go to the ball. She doesn't just want to go to the ball just to go and have a night out, which is completely fine. In this version, she's actually fighting to go to the ball so she can meet up with her friend at the palace. This makes the whole Prince Charming spotting and dancing with Cinderella at the ball even better because they've already met and established a friendship. Since they already know each other, or a version of each other, we then as an audience get to see and watch the surprise unfold as they realize who each other are.
Mr. Kit.
It's you.
In this section, I'll be making lots of comparisons to only the 1950 animated Cinderella and none of the following animated sequels, because the 1950 version is the version that the 2015 version is based on. And all respect to the 1950 Cinderella, it is and will forever be a classic. So a key reason as to why I love this movie so much is that it manages to add emotional depth and really round out the story of the animated version. A character that I really appreciate what they did with is Prince Charming. For one, he actually has a name, Kit, in this film. In the 1950 Cinderella, Prince Charming was originally composed and pretty quiet. In all honesty, we know little to nothing about him, and neither does Cinderella. And it's one of the reasons why I think people are so unsettled by letting him, quote unquote, rescue her from her situation. This, however, left a lot of room for the writers of the 2015 version to build upon the Prince Charming persona and develop a real character with a real personality and actual emotions. In the 2015 Cinderella, we learn that Kit has actual hobbies like fencing and horseback riding. On top of being charming and elegant, we learn he's charismatic and free thinking.
He learns to kind of be his own man and to stand up for the things he doesn't agree with.
He's the prince of the kingdom. However, he's also very scared and nervous. In this film, we learn that his dad, the king, is dying, and the king's last wish is to see his son married before he dies, so he knows that the kingdom will be in good hands. The slight change in the story adds a level of urgency to the storyline because he now needs to find a wife quickly. On top of needing to find a wife before his dad dies, in the movie we see that Kit struggles with the idea of becoming a king. He still sees himself as an apprentice still learning his trade. Although Kit plays Prince Charming, it's his vulnerability throughout the film that makes him a great leading man. The Wicked Stepmother, or Lady Tremaine, is another example of a character whom I really enjoy in this movie. In the original animated film and in many Cinderella retellings, the Wicked Stepmother is simply wicked to be wicked, which I don't have a problem with. I love a mean character simply just because they're mean. But I do really enjoy what the writers did with her, because in this version, we as viewers got to know why she is the way she is. Cate Blanchett in this movie does an excellent job of portraying a character who wears their grief and how that can really harden you and change you throughout the years if you don't try to move past. And there's this really powerful scene where Ella confronts Lady Tremaine.
You are young and innocent and good, and I...
It's a scene that I think adds a lot of depth to the film overall. I want to take a moment to focus on the gorgeous costume design of the film as a whole, but I would be remiss if I didn't focus specifically on arguably the centerpiece of any Cinderella, the dress. I don't care what anyone else says, this is my favorite Cinderella gown. You're free to disagree, however, this is the dress. The dress transformation scene alone is absolutely stunning to watch. Every single time I watch this specific scene, I get chills. Everything down to the way Lily spins in the gown is just perfection. Also love the way they had the magical butterflies, a motif throughout the film, swarm her in the transformation before landing and becoming a part of the dress. The dress itself is a work of art. According to the costume designer Sandy Powell, it took 20 people and over 500 hours of work to make. The dress is also embroidered with over 110,000 Swarovski crystals.
Within the skirt there's 10,000 Swarovski crystals, so it glitters and sparkles in the light.
Fun fact, you can actually go see this dress in person. It's currently on display at the Seattle Museum of Pop Culture. A good friend of mine who knows I'm obsessed with this movie actually went and took pictures of the dress in person, so here's some exclusive pictures of the Cinderella dress that Lily James wore and Richard Madden touched. Also, fun fact about the dress, while Richard and Lily were practicing the ballroom scene, she had to practice in practice dresses, of course, because they didn't want to ruin the actual gown. And apparently coffee was spilled on one of those practice dresses.
Destroyed it with coffee. It looked like a cat had got into it.
There was actually some controversy about the dress in particular, as some parents found that Lily's dress in the film could teach their young children to develop body image issues due to the size of her tiny waist in the gown.
We just did both dances in a row, and I'm in this corset, so it's really hard to breathe.
This is what the designer had to say.
Lily's dress in particular is an optical illusion, I have to say. I mean, the diameter of the skirt is about 2 meters, and then it's got the width here, and that really does make the waist look smaller than it actually is.
Lily echoed the sentiments, saying while she's had kids come up to her and rave about the dress, the true takeaway they've had from the film is the value of strength and courage. While Cinderella's dress was the main gown in the movie, the costume design for the entire film was so intricate and lively. I absolutely loved how vibrant and colorful each costume was. The ball scene in particular made it clear why it was nominated for Best Costume Design at the 2016 Oscars. Although it unfortunately didn't win, the costumes speak for themselves. There were hundreds of extras in the ball scene, and every single one of their costumes was detailed.
And then to see what Sandy did with the costumes, I felt like I was transported back in terms of cinema.
Like, if I were an extra, they wouldn't even have to pay me to be in that scene. I would be paying them. Since this was a fairy tale not set in a specific time period, costume designers and hair and makeup artists had more room to be playful and free, and it's so evident throughout the film. Even the set design was gorgeous throughout the film. A lot of CGI was used in the film, some great, some not so great, but the carriage in particular was especially beautiful. Although the outside of the palace was mostly CGI, they did build a really beautiful and well-designed set for the ball. And I think my favorite fun fact about this film has to do with the chandeliers. Each candle on the chandeliers in the ball were hand lit by crew members, and it took hours for them to lower all the chandeliers and also hours for them to light every candle. And according to Richard Madden, there were over 2,500 candles to light. One thing about me, I love a good score. I eat them up. Patrick Doyle composed the score for the film, and he didn't disappoint. Doyle has composed scores for other notable movies such as Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire and Thor. A score for a fairy tale film like this is so important to create the right ambiance for the movie, and the music is whimsical and fun and dramatic. It's perfect. If you're a subscriber of mine, you know I'm a big fan of most Cinderella remakes and retellings, but there's just something about this specific version that hits different. It's proof that Disney can actually make a really good live action adaptation, but it really does take the right people for the team. As a surplus of Disney's live action adaptations get released, let's as a society remember this movie's existence. Thank you for watching, and I hope you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.